My name is Rod Rumsby, Station Engineer at RAF Watton at present.
How long have you been here?
I've been here with the Engineering Department about 12 years. Previous to that I was in the RAF for about 5 years, from 1960 to 65.
We're now looking down the road past the station headquarters, straight at the Airman's mess. This is the one that was built when it was decided the NAFI wasn't big enough. So the NAFI became strictly the NAFI. And there's an H block to each side, which was other ranks accommodation. This is the now called unit headquarters, used to be station headquarters. This was the nerve centre of the whole RAF camp, where all the admin was done and the general day-to-day running was organised from. One of the original buildings, built before the beginning of the war. And working from left to right, the windows with the bars up, this was the pay section, where all the money was handled for the personnel on the camp. Coming across to the main building, all officers, the front door, and the other small building to the right, single story, always was and still is the CO's office. And until recently there was a blast wall right round the building, something like 3 feet thick. I believe that was constructed of 2 brick walls filled with shingle, and this was recently demolished. This is a flagpole outside the unit headquarters, probably been here in one form or another, pretty much the same since the station was originally built. And on the other side of the road we have the guard room. It's where the military police would have been based, the RAF police, a couple of cells, and generally station security, probably station warrant officer as well. It's a pretty standard type of building actually, and virtually all RAF camps have got an identical building to this for a guard room. The cell is in the block to the left-hand side. You can see the small panes of glass on the windows.
Probably find that letterbox has been here.
Yeah, even the letterbox to the left of the guard room looks to be an original installation. And slightly further to the left of that, yet another air raid shelter. This is the station sick quarters. Those had a piece added on after the war and the windows have been changed. The actual building is pretty much as it was during the war. And when we go around behind we'll be able to see there's actually some semi-protected building to the rear, which I assume they'd all bundle into in case of
in case of air
raid
attack
and such
or
like.
gas attack, they could use that.
Protected by mounds of earth up the wall. We're around the back of the medical centre now, station sick quarters, and this is the underground or semi-protected part of it. It's a building which has the soil mounded up round the side and blast walls put across the doors, and a passageway connecting it to the main building at the front for use in case of attack from the air, or I suppose for ground for that matter, or also in case of gas. This is a completely self-contained unit, decontamination centre, has its own filtration plant and
Own boiler house.
boiler, everything, completely self-sufficient. And it was in case of air attack with the gas or chemicals, protected against these, and presumably anyone who was affected would go there to be decontaminated.
Yes, it's got a large water supply. Even now they're still used, and there's a vast array of showers and bathing equipment to wash off any contamination.
Do you think it was overused?
Not seriously, no.
Again, a semi-protected building with the blast walls, and as we swing round to the left we come to even more macabre building. This was the morgue, which unfortunately saw one or two people on its day during the war, and it's attached to the ambulance shed, so presumably the ambulance would come along from any plane crashes or aircraft landing with injured personnel on board. And we've got the hospital to one side and unfortunately the morgue to the other. Looking at the decontamination centre from the other side, two entrances with the blast walls outside, and the main building banked up with earth.
That's a big building over there.
Yes, as we swing round to the left from it, you see in the background the officers' mess, which is pretty much unchanged since the war. We'll have a look at that in a bit more detail shortly.
Looks like it's different.
Yeah, the camouflage again visible on it, still in places. We're now round the back of the decontamination centre, looking across the sports field at the rear of the officers' mess. This is where the King's Own Scottish Borderers beat the retreat when they were stationed here during the early part of the war for ground defence troops. And you swing round past the officers' mess. You're just in the background, the other field compound. Further round still, past the trees, we come to the motor transport section, which is pretty well unchanged. Hangars in the background.
We're standing in the yard in front of the MT section, which I don't think has changed an awful lot over the years. It's just a fairly plain concrete building with large doors to enable the transport to get in for maintenance. Behind us here we have the old standby generator house, which was used to supply emergency power to the station if the outside mains failed at any time. No longer used for such purposes now, I'm afraid.
This one we think was probably the crew room for the MT mechanics, for a cup of tea and a quick warm-up. Still got a chimney at the top of the stove. And swing around across the square where the vehicles would have been parked. And then on the original bays, which would have been a workshop for vehicle maintenance. The other buildings we've looked at we think probably were a later addition for the Americans, who tended to be very much more mechanised than our own Air Force. And these are the workshops where the repairs would have been carried out.
I think they used to use those bays across there for general parking of vehicles, and I think this one here with a slightly higher ceiling was the workshop.
This was the actual main workshop, was it?
Yeah.
We've got the sergeant's mess. It was. Now been relegated to the Airman's mess. Originally built for the sergeants, with you say there's dining rooms and ante rooms downstairs, and then actual accommodation upstairs
and in that wing at the end there. Yes.
Here we are at the top of the airfield then, and we're now looking at the engineer's shop, yes? That's right?
Yeah, that's the old station workshops. It's in two portions. The portion on the left with the large doors is, or was, the metal workshop. Had the lathes,
yes,
milling machines and general engineering equipment. The portion on the right, similar construction, was, and still is actually, a carpenter's shop. It's used by a contractor now, but the old woodworking machinery is still in there in parts.
Yeah. And you say there's a blacksmith department to the rear?
That's right. At the rear of the building you've got a blacksmith, coppersmith, tinsmith shop.
Yeah, yeah. So coming round to the left from here, we come to a slightly newer type of building. We can see by the roof that's American design, and obviously a later addition.
That's an annex to station workshop and was used, we assume it was used for spraying of vehicles and that type of equipment, large pieces of ground equipment. It's still used as a spray shop today.
Yeah, and coming around still further, we come to yet another American construction with the asbestos roof. Another newer style building here, again built by the Americans between 43 and the end of the war. And you say it was the annex for a parachute packing?
Yeah, it was an extension to the parachute section, which was the old cast concrete building farther down. Obviously the state of the art of safety equipment increased with the large American forces, and they needed a larger building, probably used for dinghy packing and other vital safety equipment.
Yeah, it's not a very big building, the original, is it?
No, it wasn't. No, it was long enough to lay out a parachute and its rigging lines on a large long table, and that was about all.
That's about it, yeah. And to the rear we see a tall building. We just see the roof, the parachute drying section.
That's right, a very high building, yeah.
Because they don't work very well when they're wet, do they?
No, they don't. No.
Original parachute packing building.
It doesn't look big enough, does it?
No, that's only just long enough
It's about long enough to
hang the parachute out long ways.
What about the buildings up top there? Are they all modern?
The large red brick building up there was a boiler house for heating these two hangars. It was built sort of late 50s, but it's been long defunct.
And the concrete open-ended ones, are they for crash tenders for the airfield?
Crash tenders and fill tanker bays. They were placed at strategic intervals all over the airfield and the technical site, so that any sort of air raid warning, they could park the tankers and the vehicles out of harm's way. They used to have a roller shutter door fore and aft, but they've been taken off for safety reasons in latter years.
Yeah, so if we come a little bit more to the left, we can see the side of, this is Hangar 3 here, yes?
This is Hangar 3, yes. Building 66.
Now, these ones were built with the airfield, weren't they? In the late 1930s.
Yeah.
And were finished when the airfield actually opened up.
Yes, they're one of the, probably the first buildings to be put up, I would imagine.
Pretty big, aren't they?
They are big, they're about an acre.
Cover an acre?
Acre, yeah.
That's several aeroplanes.
It is.
Right, looking at the number 3 hangar again here, just to give you an idea, we've got Ken standing there to give you a comparison size-wise. A pretty mammoth construction. We've got 4 identical ones in a sort of a curve, haven't we, a quarter circle around a perimeter track. Of course, in those days I think we just had a hard standing perimeter track and no runways as such, did we?
No, there was no runways, it was purely grass runways. I would think this piece of concrete at the front of this hangar is pretty well original. It's sort of a tar macadam over concrete, but further along they've relayed the concrete approaches to the hangars to accommodate larger aircraft, and also to mate up with the new dispersal pans which were put up there in the early 60s.
Yes, and this concrete building with the little balcony round the top across here is the original watchtower before the American type control tower came to being, yes?
That's right, yeah.
There is the concrete watchtower.
Yeah, and to the rear of it, coming this way, that concrete building was the original fire tender shed.
Ah. And then, of course, the Americans came along with their own design of control tower, which is further round to our right. And the glass piece, nothing to do with it on top?
No, the top piece was added at a later date.
Yeah, so just the white piece with the bricked up windows.
That's right.
The Americans worked with.
Yeah.
And of course, that a lot nearer the runway.
Yes, well, originally the runway used to run more or less across the front, about where that control tower is now, so it was easily visible, both ends of the approach and landing, from that tower.
Yeah. This building here looking rather the worse for wear. It's the old station armory, again built in concrete. See all the bars at the windows. It's between hangar 2 and 3. It's where all the rifles and such like were kept, small arms. Did he have a separate ammunition store, or?
Yes, the ammunition stores was kept at various. There was some down there by the hangar, and there was
dotted
some more,
about.
yeah, another one down there. Yeah,
Yes.
further larger ammunition. Most of it was the bigger ammunition, the bombs, etc., were kept in the bomb dump, which is down the other end of the
So
aircraft.
basically, you had rifles and submachine guns and pistols.
And the machine guns for the aircraft.
They were in as well.
They were looked after.
That's the armory, and round to the right on the other side of the road. We've just got the boiler house, and this place actually manages to heat the whole station.
It still does.
And still does to this day. I imagine the equipment doing it slightly
Yes,
more
we've
modified.
changed. Yeah, it used to be coal-fired originally, and that's obviously over the years has been changed to oil-fired. But it still heats virtually the same, almost the same air as it did way back in 1939.
It must have used an awful lot of coal to heat a place the size of this station.
Yes, there was quite a large coal compound out the back, which has now been changed to house the oil tanks, which fire the boilers nowadays.
Well, life had to go on even in the war, and we even got bomb-proof toilets we see here, although they're now all boarded up and out of use. And round to the right, having passed the air raid shelter, we come to the main stores. And you say everything, including aircraft parts, used to turn up here.
Yeah, it used to come through the main stores at some stage of the game.
Hence the large building in the middle with the tall doors. Lumps of aeroplane.
That's right.
Yeah. And there's barrack stores.
Barrack stores, clothing stores and general technical stores, yeah.
Busy place.
It was a busy place, still is.
Those big doors were like that because of what?
Of course, the size of things had to go in and out. There's all aircraft parts and such like, and the steel work to each side of them as a form of reinforcing for the runners, because they were so heavy. They would take the strain of the doors being slid to one side and the other.
Those doors were built in a similar manner to the hangar doors. They were sort of a hollow steel structure, which during the war they were filled with gravel to absorb any blasts. And the gravel's since been removed, but that's still a very heavy piece of equipment.
This is the back entrance of the supply stores, which overlook the main parade ground. We swing round, come to the end of Hangar 2, Hangar 1, and round to the first of the barrack blocks, which overlooks the square. We had one lady recounting to us that there was a big cheer one day when a bomb dropped very close to here and brought a halt to all parades for the day. There's two barrack blocks on the right, and on the far side of the square we have what most people around here know as the Shirley Club. It's in fact the original Airman's Mess, although whether it was actually used as such before the new one was built across the road, we don't know. It was also built as a NAFI and ended up, I believe, solely as a NAFI. Is this correct, Rod?
That's right. NAFI and sort of other social clubs. Corporals Club, Wives Club, and I think the Buffaloes had a little club there as well.
Yeah. Clubs. And the name Shirley Club came along, you say, about 1960, right?
Yeah, it been about in the 1960s. It was named after Air Vice Marshal Shirley, who was AOC Signals Command at that time.
Camouflage is very clear on it still, isn't it?
It is. It's lasted very well.
Sort of two ends of the scale. You've got the naffy for enjoying yourself, and directly outside the door, the square for a bit of bashing and being bellowed at.
And often one of which came first, the refreshment before or the refreshment after a square bashing session.
Yeah. We're now standing on top of a basic blast shelter. These are dotted about all over the camp. I know just for the personnel from the hangars and anywhere around to dive in if there was an air raid warning.
We've all seen pictures of that in films on TV.
Oh yes, yeah.
This isn't
Cast concrete outside and brick wall running through the middle. This is looking at the entrance.
Siren or air raid warning going, and people dashing in from the buildings around.
Yes, I wouldn't think the queue was too orderly, to be honest. There are a lot of actual underground ones as well, true air raid shelters. This is just a sort of quick. I think a lot of people probably dived over the walls rather than queued in an orderly fashion.
Would you like to give an example?
Would you like to dive in, Kenneth, for us? Imagine there's an air raid.
Hold your hat on with one hand.
No.
We're looking at a standard type air raid shelter here now, the underground ones, and Rod's just told us something we didn't realise before. Quite an innovation, I think, in those days. You tell me there's got heating in them, Rod?
Yes, we were looking at some old heating mains the other week, trying to find a leak, and we noticed that there was a tee off from the heating mains that disappeared into the shelters. We weren't able to follow it up to see whether there was still pipe work in there because they've all been bricked up over the years, but it looks as though they may well have been heated in those early days. A good thing, I should think.
Yes.
The tennis courts are original as well, but I would swear that.
The tennis courts, you think, have been here all
They're
this?
marked on the plan as Site 4.
Yeah. There's a bit of a recreation area, perhaps, because we've got the married quarters here at this end. All the houses just about visible in camouflage still, and they were used by the WAFs in the early part of the war. They were billeted in them. A lot more housing being put up since as married quarters, but these were the original ones. Recently been sold off, of course.
When you're talking about camouflage, that is the remains of it on the walls there.
Yes, you can see quite clearly actually on this one. There's a regular green and brown pattern, and this type was known as Mickey Mouse ears because of the sort of large, rounded pattern.
Yeah.
That was used on vehicles. It was pretty much a overall scheme used at that time.
Was it paint or sort of emulsion or what?
I would imagine
Just
to last
temper?
this long it must have been some sort of paint. Because these houses are now 40 years old.
And I suppose the other use could
50 years old. 50
Okay.
years old.
Doesn't look that old, does it?
No. Now we're looking at the underground fuel compounds. There's two of them on the airfield. Any idea what sort of capacity?
Yeah, 72,000 gallons they held. So there were 6 tanks. The tanks themselves are buried below the normal ground level. That mound you can see is a large concrete structure which protected the pumps and the tops of the tanks, and then it was covered with earth to sort of merge in with the surrounding countryside.
So you've got 6 12,000 gallon tanks?
That's right, yeah.
And 2 of them?
There's
on
2
the
involved
airfield.
installations, yeah.
So this is all sort of trade training and briefing huts and crew room?
Erected at various times since during the war and possibly afterwards. I hadn't any dates on those.
So swinging around past the field compound again. The houses in the background are about 1947, I think, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
47.
again sold off recently. And carrying on round to the right, this is the newer buildings here, put up well after the war. Carrying on round to the right, we've got a couple of small hangars here. These are a much more modern addition. Little building in the distance. This is what was used before a shooting in but came into being. Reinforced concrete building with a sort of soil backdrop to it, and the aircraft were actually lined up on this, and they used to fire into the building to synchronise the guns. That's probably the furthest extent of the actual RAF camp when it first opened, and just this side of the road that ran from Carver up to Griston.
Just beyond that building actually is the bomb dump, which was also original.
Yes. This is sort of the last building, and
that would be the last building as such.
Yeah, and I know people are saying they rode bicycles along the road with the aircraft taking off over the top of them.
Yes, they would do. Yeah,
the Americans put a stop to this because they continued quite a long way beyond the road.
They did, yes.
As we sweep round, you can see the sort of openness of it all. Quite a hill, actually. You can just see the top of Griston Church Tower and the prison boiler chimneys, which gives an idea of the sort of rise in the ground towards the centre. Although the ground was sort of reworked, I suppose is the best description, by the American engineers, the 899th Engineer Battalion, in 1943.